Thank you so much for making time to come here today. I am now concluded and will leave tomorrow morning Sudan after I'm about to leave tomorrow morning after having concluded my second trip to Sudan as prosecutor of the ICC. I'm very grateful to the many members of the media from different media houses for finding the time to cover a very important issue, namely the issue of justice for the people of Darfur and the people of Sudan. I'd like to acknowledge the respected members of the diplomatic corps for making time as well. This is an issue that should unite us. This is an issue that we should view as our own, that justice cannot be indefinite. On this trip, I have been to Darfur for the first time. While I was in Darfur, the Deputy Prosecutor Nazat Shamin had meetings with the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General in Sudan. I went to South Sudan. I visited the Kalma camp, and I also had the opportunity of speaking to the Valley and the Security Committee. And in central Darfur, after meeting the Valley and the Security Committee, I also went to the Hamidiya camp and also the Hasahisha camp. Victims have every right to justice. And as I briefed the Security Council yesterday, for the first time since the case was referred in 2005, this was the first briefing from the land of Sudan, from the very noble and respected land of Sudan, that the Security Council has been briefed in relation to their decision to refer the Darfur situation to the court. I identified in that there had been some cooperation. I am very grateful to the government of Sudan for allowing me the privilege and that of my delegation for entering Sudan. I'm grateful for the courtesy receiving us at the airport and facilitating security as we go to Darfur. But I was also quite candid with the Security Council yesterday that the last few months have shown a backward step in the cooperation that's been given. And in my report that was discussed yesterday, I also identified benchmarks that are there for your viewers to read. It's online, that will determine over the next few weeks whether or not this meeting was a success. Some things we're seeking are very straightforward: multiple entry visas, facilitation of opening an office so we can have more sustained dialogue with the government in Sudan, with the authorities here, and with the victims in Darfur, and a commitment that requests for assistance should not go unanswered. Yesterday I had met the Deputy Chair of the Sovereignty Council, and just now I am coming from meeting the Chair of the Sovereignty Council, General Burhan. In that meeting, full cooperation was promised. In the meeting with the Chair of the Sovereignty Council, the Minister of Justice was also present, and the Minister of Justice is the focal point assigned by the government of Sudan to the ICC. And I have been given clear assurances that requests for assistance will be answered promptly. There has been a commitment that was made also that monthly meetings will take place, not only with the focal points but with departmental focal points across the government assigned by the Sudanese authorities, to make sure we don't just keep talking in circles, but we can actually make sure there is transparency about what we expect, what we need, and what the victims demand, which is movement, which is action. I do hope, as I told the Council, that we will be able to report to the Council next time of clear, concrete and discernible action. I must say, the meeting just now with the Chair of the Sovereignty Council went very well in terms of the promises made. Everything asked for, I was assured that the government is absolutely serious about justice for the people of Darfur. I was told that requests would be answered, and I was also told that we can have some technical discussions so we can move forward with the promises that have been made and trying to render them into some concrete decisions. But what I do say is that we need to act. It is an embarrassment that after collective embarrassment, that after 17 years of the Security Council referrals, so much more still needs to be done. There has been progress, and it means a lot. I'm not saying it, I'm repeating what I heard in Kalma camp and in the other camps in Darfur, and what victims and survivors of the Darfur community have said around the world. That the fact that the trial of Mr. Abdurrahman al-Kushayd started in April was a singular moment. It shows that justice delayed does not automatically mean that justice is denied. It shows that despite obfuscation and lack of cooperation over the previous government of former President Omar al-Bashir, the animosity shown to the administration of justice and the authority of the Security Council, that individuals and victims can have their day in court. Since April, when I opened the Ali Kushayd case, 28 witnesses have testified. More witnesses will testify this week. But at the same time, we need to do more. And I think that needs to be a collective responsibility. Nobody can be a bystander, and nobody can say it's somebody else's job. It is not enough for the Security Council to say it's all down to the ICC, or for Sudan to say it's about other matters, or for me for that matter. We need to work in a way that creates partnerships in which we realize that despite the many fractures and fault lines in international relations today, the people of Darfur that I have seen living in very often pitiful conditions, they're not political pawns. Their basic rights to justice, the rights for people who've been raped or their parents or their family members or their children have been killed, is something that should not fall prey to the indulgences or even the expediencies of current politics. If we can somehow pause for a moment and put our humanity to the front and put our legal obligations very much in gear and realize that the situation of Sudan is imperative, not only for the people of Darfur, but for the authority of the Security Council, I hope we can move forward in a way that is better and the victims are not left holding on to prayers and hopes, but we can present collectively to them, something that they themselves own, which is their right, their integrity, and the obligation for independent investigations and accountability. So really this is what I wanted to say in general, and I look forward to answering a few questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
مرحبا، شكرا على الفرصة. أنا حافظ كبير وقعت في السودان. فأنا أسأل عن متكافئ بأنكم منعتم من لقاء الرئيس السابق عمر البشير، وأنت ذكرت أن هناك تعاون فيما بينكم. أريد أيضا أن نعرف أهم مشاكل التعاون، هل سيمثل البشير في الخرطوم أم يجب أن يذهب إلى لاهاي؟ السؤال الآخر فيما يخص قضية كوشي، هل هناك تحقيقات جديدة في هذه القضية؟ أم أن التحقيقات القديمة هي التي تدور حولها المحاكمة حاليا؟ وهل يمكن في أي مرحلة من مراحل التحقيق أن تصدر لائحة الاتهام تضم آخرين غير اللائحة التي صدرت سابقا؟ وشكرا.
To the accused, I made it clear in the report that's available in writing that one of our RFAs, one of our requests for assistance, was access to the accused persons who are detained here in Sudan, namely former President Omar al-Bashir, Mr. Hussein and Mr. Haroon. We said that we had not had a reply to that request for assistance. So that is the position in relation to that. Today, the Minister of Justice just told me that the lawyers have declined to meet with us, but we're waiting for some written confirmation to a formal request for assistance to Sudan. In relation to the accused persons generally, it's a matter of public record that there are 4 warrants outstanding. 3 warrants that were applied for by my predecessors are in custody here in Sudan. What I have said repeatedly since I commenced my responsibilities in June of last year was that cooperation was needed. The archives should be opened up to the Office of the Prosecutor. I've offered also joint investigations with the Sudanese authorities, but at the very least, requests for assistance should be responded to, because that's what the Security Council in 1593 required. The mandatory language that Sudan shall cooperate with the ICC. So I don't want to create a wrong impression. I do not take for granted the fact we are here. It's been a long time, but this is certainly better than it was during the presidency of Omar al-Bashir. I do not take for granted that the government have given multi-entry visas to my small delegation that you see, or that I had the opportunity to visit the people of Darfur. But international criminal justice requires much more than diplomatic niceties. It really requires a willingness to engage to get hold of the truth. Because victims around the world, and this is my experience, they know what the truth is. They also know what is real and what are empty words. And unless we collectively can find some system of accountability which is seen to be independent, credible, impartial, and not trying to hide the truth but is willing to speak the truth, I think the cycle of violence that we saw in 2003 and 4 commenced. We run the risk that it will never be broken because we never come to terms with certain basic obligations. So in terms of any new charges, I've said quite publicly that I am focusing on the warrants that are there, and I've mentioned that, the 4 warrants that are there, you all know them. Let's try and get progress there, and I think that should be the need of the hour. I don't want to get distracted with other things. We need to also show progress to the people, and we do that by delivering on the clear obligations and the clear requests that have been made over the years, and the 17 requests for assistance that I have sent to Sudan since I commenced my term in June of last year. Thank you.
هل حصلت على وعود قاطعة بتسليم المطلوبين أن الأمر ما يزال في حدود التعاون؟ 2 في بشأن المحاكمة الجارية المتعلقة بأحمد علي بشير، هل إذا وردت أو وجهت اتهامات أثناء المحاكمة أو وردت اتهامات لطالعين آخرين أثناء المحاكمة، هل سيتم تلقي اتهامات لهم أن المحاكمة ستكتفي بالتهامين الحالية؟ شكرا.
Thank you. There are 31 counts. In fact, all the counts that were preferred by my office were confirmed by the pre-trial judges of the ICC. And the trial judges of the ICC are now receiving evidence that my office is presenting in support of those 31 counts. And the defense are also asking questions. And at the end of that process, the judges will decide whether or not we have discharged our burden of proving those allegations beyond reasonable doubt. I mentioned to the judges when I opened the trial in April my very sincere and respectful submission that by any metric this is a strong case. But fortunately we have independent judges who will decide it for themselves, and they will scrutinize whether or not we've proved the cases. So in terms of any other charges, I actually don't know about conspiracy charges. We've got 31 counts. It's available in Arabic online, and you can see what those charges are. In relation to the ICC, it is actually the wonderful thing about the law, it gives many options. We have clear jurisdiction and there are clear obligations to cooperate. The ICC headquarters are in The Hague. The ICC can also sit away from the seat of the court. There's many other options as well. The principle of complementarity is one of the foundations of the court. But the simple matter is, despite some changes to the domestic laws, there hasn't been any trials in relation to Darfur that I'm aware of. So what we need to do is to have progress. I won't say more, but I had quite a good conversation just now, as I mentioned, with the chair of the Sovereignty Council. He said to me very clearly he is committed to justice for the people of Darfur. We have agreed certain technical aspects that it's not appropriate to discuss at the moment. We agreed that those could be presented to the Minister of Justice. We now have his direct contact details. We didn't have that for some months. And we will make sure that we can follow up, even by telephone, to actually get certain decisions if we feel that there has not been responsiveness, so that we have the opportunity to directly engage with the Minister of Justice and the senior leadership in charge to make sure that the promises made are promises we collectively keep. And I think time will tell whether or not we succeed, but the words that I have just heard from the chair of the Sovereignty Council are very positive. The challenge now is delivering those in practice. And that requires all of us to be clear about what's needed and to monitor, track the implementation of the promises over the next period. And the good thing is I have another report to the Council in 6 months, and as I said, the next few weeks will be quite revealing. Thank you. 2 men, any ladies? Please, thank you. No, our sister should speak first.
I'm Arabi and I work for Sudan Tribune. Actually, I have 2 questions. One regarding, you said, you answered my colleague here, and you told me that you do not intend to work on it or any other, suspects rather than the people who you guys issued warranties against. My question is, what if, the evidence and the track of implementing or justice led to other suspects? And I'm talking here about suspects who are not, from the fallen regime, because we've been, witnessing incidents here and there on violations against humanity, especially women, not only from the fallen regime, but also from, other militias and other armed movements. You're here trying, I understand you guys are trying to, implement justice, and I think this is one thing that is also very vital. And my other question is, are you guys willing in the future to share the documentation and, of the evidence and the testimonies that you guys are getting? Because this is a very vital, cause and amid a very sensitive and transformative, era in the Sudan history. So, yes, I'm talking here about the transparency. To what extent are you guys willing to be transparent about the whole implementation of, the process? And thank you.
The sharing of evidence, who do you mean? Sharing with who? With the public? With
yeah, with the public, yes.
So, in relation to the latter, the last point, you can take a seat if you're comfortable, whichever you like. In relation to the last point, criminal investigations in most parts of the world are confidential. And the reason they're confidential is we have duties to witnesses and victims, some of whom are very vulnerable. The Rome Statute places very high regard by virtue of Article 68 of the Rome Statute, to the rights of victims and witnesses and those that are vulnerable or traumatized. And there are certain measures, including protective measures, that the court may apply. Now, the transparency is not from me, it's in the process of the trial. And in the trial, you can watch online. I'm sure you heard the opening, it was available. Many witnesses have testified, and even those whose identity may be protected, maybe you will still hear that, well, not maybe, you will and can hear their voices, even if there is some face distortion or voice distortion to protect their identities, so they're not targeted for speaking the truth. And these measures are available also to the defense witnesses. So that's how, in a criminal process, you have transparency. What you don't do is start revealing before there is cooperation or before that there is, a trial or an accused in custody, evidence of what you've got. But at the same time, yes, I think that's probably the best answer in relation to this. In terms of the accused, we have jurisdiction that is ongoing. But it's very easy to make promises that one does not keep. So instead of pretending or saying something which is not true, which I cannot do either as an individual and definitely not as a prosecutor and officer of the court, I have been quite transparent. The challenge now is getting cooperation and getting the necessary evidence and assistance from Sudan relating to the outstanding warrants, and particularly the people that are in custody here. I think if we can't do that, that represents a serious problem. But at the same time, I have said that we need to try to move forward. I think it's in the interest of the victims. And if I reach a dead end, of course, it is a fool that bangs his or her head against the wall indefinitely. What a sane person does is try to reorientate themselves and navigate a different route to the destination that they want to reach. And our destination is justice. And I want to ensure that all situations, that specifically Security Council referrals, are not what I have described as never-ending stories. They can't go on indefinitely. If the councils have confidence in the ICC, we need to find a way to actually have more focused investigations and bring results and show the impact and utility of international criminal law. But I cannot close the situation simply because it is convenient. I can only seek to close the situation when I feel the purpose has been met, namely the fight against impunity and the principle that no man or woman walking is a god, but the law is above all of us and the principle of accountability has to be protected. That journey can be finished. It can be ended by national authorities, but it has to be started. And the problem is we're not at the stage of it starting apart from one important trial in The Hague. And for this, as I said, none of us can be bystanders. You as Sudanese, the media, the government, international community, member states, state parties, non-state parties, and the council, and my office must share the burden of responsibility. And I think that's what's been lacking. We shouldn't seek these positions if we want to talk as if it's frivolous. We should seek these positions of authority in government, in politics, in law, in media, if we're willing to speak the truth and move things forward. And I think this is the area where there's room for improvement. My office also needs to improve. I'm the first to admit it. This is why I want to be based here full time. I want the office to be based here in Khartoum in the Sudan situation, because we can't investigate by remote control from The Hague. We need to be with the people and we can communicate freely, meet with the government when there's problems, and it can't be left to these intermittent engagements, even with the benefits of video conferencing and telephones. There's nothing like building trust by face-to-face meetings. And I hope collectively, if we improve, if we try to have a strategy, which we do, we've conveyed it to the government, I hope the government will do their part, and all of you, the media, as watchdogs of democratic and other societies, we'll also see whether or not promises made are promises kept, as I said before. Thank you.
From Agency France Press. At the end of your last visit, you mentioned that you have discussion with Sudan government to deploy members of your office in Darfur on the ground. Any progress have been made in this? My second question is, do you have a specific date to start office here in Khartoum?
The high hopes that I had when I was here in August were moderated, of course, by the events of October and the difficulties that obviously occurred thereafter. I indicated just now with the chair of the Sovereignty Council, General Burhan, in the Minister of Justice's presence, that by virtue of the Memorandum of Understanding that I signed in August with the Minister of Justice, and which the chair of the Sovereignty Council, General Burhan, maintained very clearly, in the clearest possible terms, that it remains valid and in force, that I would open an office without delay. Now, the registry, these are maybe details that are not important, the registry of the court sent in May a letter to the Minister of Justice as Sudan's focal point, seeking an exchange of letters that allows this to be regularized in a way that is required by the ICC. I raised that issue also to the Minister of Justice in the presence of Chairman Burhan, and I'm hopeful that will move forward. But I've already given instructions to the team, and I spoke also to the Deputy Prosecutor, that a team has to come here within the next 2 weeks, and I want a continuous field presence in here, in Sudan, until further notice. I do not want us to, we have to move forward on this investigation. And I also promised the survivors or the IDPs in the various camps that I wish I could have spent the whole day with them. I spent much longer in Kalma camp than I could spend in Hasahisha and Hamidia camp. And I also gave them my word that inshallah in the next 1 month the team will come to Darfur. So I have to keep my word, and this is why you can look also now at the Deputy Prosecutor, Nazat Chamid. The instructions are very clear, the team needs to come here within 2 weeks. I've been promised repeatedly that multiple entry visas will be given by the government because we don't work without, we have to comply with the laws of the land. But if we get those visas in the way that I've been promised, I've said the team has to come here within 2 weeks. And thereafter, I will establish the office as soon as possible, but be that as it may, the team has to be here. In hotels or otherwise, we need to be here to move things forward, because I think now we're at a critical juncture of showing whether or not all of us collectively can deliver on the promises to victims, and that's what we have to do our part as the office, and then others have no excuse, I think, to do their part. Thank you.
دي سؤالين. السؤال الأول، الآن مرت 3 سنوات بعد سقوط نظام البشير، وما زال المحكمة الجنايات الدولية لم تستخدم الضغط اللازم لتسليم بعض المتهمين في الإبادات الجماعية الموجودين الآن في السودان. لماذا لم تستخدم الضغط اللازم؟ وما هي الخطوات التي يمكن أن تستخدمها المحكمة الجنايات لاحقا لتسليم هؤلاء المرتكبين جرائم الإبادة الجماعية؟ السؤال الثاني، في خلال حديثك تحدثت أن هنالك خلال أسبوعين سوف يتم تحديد بعض الأشياء من قبل المجلس. يفترض أن تحدد بعض الأشياء من قبل المجلس. ما هي الأشياء التي يمكن أن تحدد خلال الأسبوعين؟
Promises about any action by the Security Council. What I was saying, God willing, is I have given instructions that within 2 weeks I want to see a continuous field presence here in Sudan. In October, the team was here in October. We were about to open the office, but as you may understand, they had to leave because of the events of October, and that delayed matters. Simultaneously, we're trying to do 3 things. We're waiting for the Minister of Justice to do the exchange of letters to the registrar. This is the first. In parallel with that, I have indicated that as part of my own authority, I'm opening an office, a facility here in Sudan, based upon the Memorandum of Understanding that the Chair of the Sovereignty Council maintains is valid. Thirdly, there will be a continuous field presence here. What this means is the previous model of the office is to come for a period, then they go back to The Hague. Then maybe at some period later they may come again. This is a process that I think is expensive. It is not as efficient as it would be if we were here all the time. And this is why not just in Sudan, in many other situations that I'm involved in, I want to try to build a better relationship with the government. I'm doing this in Ukraine, I'm doing this in Bangladesh and Myanmar, in Venezuela. We have to be with the country to speak with respect to the authorities and actually try to move things forward. So that's the area. In terms of pressure, I'm not special forces, you can see by looking at me, unfortunately. I'm simply a lawyer, and I'm an international servant, and of course the prosecutor of the ICC. So what is the pressure? The pressure we have is simply the law. The Security Council made determinations in 2005, nobody had a gun at their head, that the Sudan situation, the Darfur situation represents a threat to international peace and security. And they have certain obligations, because that's very serious. That is the most serious determination that the Council can make. The most powerful resolution the Council can make. So this is why I said this is not about the success of the Office of the Prosecutor, or even about the rights of the Sudanese people to justice. It's even in addition to that, this calls into question whether or not we want to live in a world where there is law, where promises made are kept, or whether or not promises are a temporary distraction to avoid doing the needful. And I think this is why Sudan, the Darfur people, have a right to have their issue looked at more closely by the Council. I made a very respectful suggestion that the Council may wish to consider in due course having a briefing, holding a session in Sudan. In my last mandate, I had the honor of briefing, which was the special advisor and head of the team investigating Daesh. The Council came to Baghdad. So I suggested to the Council yesterday maybe that's something they want to consider. They can meet with the authorities in Khartoum, but they can also go to the camps and speak to the people there, because I think if their plight, if their hopes, and they have so much hope and gratitude to the Security Council, they have so much belief in justice, if that doesn't make our humanity come to the fore and allow political differences to see to the back, we are in a very troublesome place as an international community. So that's what I can do. It's simply, as a lawyer, to keep focusing on the law. And of course we have certain legal strategies that are available, but I've been quite transparent about what I think is a possible way forward, which is to show cooperation in relation to those warrants now. And I think that would be meaningful to the victims, and that may allow me to put forward a plan to the Council of exiting the Sudan situation, but I can't do that. I can't be exhausted by non-cooperation or by delay. We have to applaud Sudan for what they've done so far, and my simple request was we need to do more. And as I said, the Chair of the Sovereignty Council gave me a lot of promises just now, and I very much hope and believe he'll be a man of his word, and Sudan will deliver on those important promises, and I will do my best to play my part as prosecutor, along with the very good members of my office. Thank you.
سؤال المدعي العام متعلق بزيارة المدعي العام للبشير. المدعي العام أرى لك توضيح سبب زيارته للبشير، خاصة إذا المحكمة حسب أنك تمثل الاتهام الجنائي، فالأكبر كان في مرحلة تحقيق وليس مرحلة إصدار أوامر وليس مرحلة تحقيق. أريد للمدعي العام توضيح سبب زيارته للبشير، هل يمنعني من تسليم نفسي مثلا؟
It's normal in many systems that the prosecution will ask to speak to the accused, and this is what I asked. I have also a responsibility under the Rome Statute, it's called Article 54, to investigate incriminating and exculpatory evidence equally. In other words, evidence that may exonerate an individual, as well as evidence that may incriminate an individual. And so it's normal and I think quite logical, and it's a beautiful feature of the Rome Statute, if we properly respect it, that we have to look at both sides to make sure the cases we have are strong, are solid, and we can present them to the judges of the ICC. So this is why I made the request, and I hope that really answers the question. But in addition to access to the individuals, something that doesn't need the consent of anybody except the government is access to the presidential archives, to the papers regarding from the military and from others. And I think this is something we requested in the request for assistance, and it's something I would like to make sure that we have responses to. And this is one of the key deliverables that I mentioned in my written report to the Security Council that will be revealing over the next period. Do we get responses to those requests for assistance? I think it's 22 in total, and 17 since my last mission, or since 17 since January.
My question that the International Criminal Court paid many visits to Sudan. I think is it a legal process, or there is no willing
Sorry,
government?
can you start again? Sorry, I was listening to Arabic.
The International Criminal Court paid many visits to Sudan. I think is it a legal process, or the government is not willing to deal with the International Criminal Court?
Question? I didn't follow. Can you ask again? In Arabic, maybe.
المحكمة الجنائية الدولية دفعت المحكمة الجنائية الدولية سجلت عدة زيارات إلى السودان. هل هذا يعتبر إجراءات قانونية أم أن هناك عدم الرضا من الحكومة للتعامل معه؟
Grateful to be here. One has to be quite fair. The simple truth is that things are better since the period of Omar al-Bashir, former president, because then there was no communication with the office. No lawyer was allowed in since the application for that warrant was made. No letter was accepted by the office at Sudan's embassies. They were returned without opening. I have just come from the chair of the Sovereignty Council. I met yesterday the deputy chair of the Sovereignty Council. We've engaged with the Attorney General, the Minister of Justice. The Sudanese police and military escorted me to Darfur and left me before we entered the camps. So this is something that I say thank you for. It is better. But what is required in terms of criminal justice is more than that. It is active cooperation, because both under the 3rd of October 2020 Juba Peace Agreement, as well as pursuant to the Security Council requirement in 2005, when the referral was made, is active cooperation. And one of the areas that I've identified, I'll do so again, is we have a track record of many, many requests for assistance. These are written requests asking for specific pieces of evidence or items. They have not been responded to. And so these are areas we've identified as being problematic. What we've arranged on this mission, inshallah, is a commitment. Firstly, with direct access to some of the senior members, including the Minister of Justice at focal point, a commitment to monthly meetings of an interdepartmental task force on Sudan's side, in which we can track and follow up on those requests. So when I send them, it's not a black hole in which nothing returns. And that's a very good way then of monitoring what is happening. Now there may be many reasons. I always assume good faith. It could be sometimes there are problems with administration, there's complexities, there's a lot of issues, of course, in Sudan, or there may be an issue that it's not given the priority and that's why we're not getting responses. So I don't need to make any determination at the moment. I assume good faith. I've said what the chairman said, which was very encouraging. It was very positive, and time will tell. Collectively, we will do our part. I will do what we have discussed in the meeting in terms of certain specific proposals, and I hope we'll have the monthly meetings. We'll get the responses, in which case we can, in a transparent fashion, in my next report to the council, against the benchmarks in the detail, say whether or not the cooperation is what I expect, or still, if the cooperation is of such a nature that I think the rights and the promises to the victims will not be kept. So I hope that's an answer.
طلاب الظافر قناة الجزيرة، نحن قناة دولية ولدينا مشاهدون يهتمون بقضايا أخرى. سيد المدعي العام، هنالك طلبات من السلطة الفلسطينية بفتح تحقيق فيما حدث من انتهاكات في الأراضي المحتلة. هل هنالك جديد وهل وجدتم التعاون من الأطراف ذات الصلة في هذا الملف؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Interview, and you asked me the same question, and I gave you an answer. So in relation to that, we are looking at many situations. We're using our resources in as effective a way as possible. But I do think, quite honestly, I'm in Khartoum, and the bandwidth of you as journalists needs to be able to look at a number of situations, but sometimes let us focus on the people of Darfur. Because I have also responsibilities in Ukraine, or we have Palestine situation, or we have Myanmar, Bangladesh, or Philippines, South Africa, Republic, so many cases for that. But sometimes let us just realize that as we are talking, there are people in camps that have been there since 2003. The council opened, I said 2004. I saw children that are infants, children who are 7, who are 8, who are 10. They have been born in those conditions. We should think they are our children. We should think those women are our sisters and those men are our brothers, and realize, would we be comfortable just talking about other issues, or should we try finally to focus with stamina on solving their predicament? Otherwise we just talk a good talk, even with the press. We talk all the time, it's interesting stories, but what changes? My task, my responsibility now in Sudan is try to help in a positive way that we change the dynamic in Sudan, in Darfur, and moving forward. But we are trying in terms of many other parts of the world where I've inherited cases with clear responsibilities and difficulties. We are trying our best to make sure that they are prioritized in a sustainable manner, in a way that is by some clear benchmarks. I've said openly that I would prioritize Security Council referrals first, because it's not an everyday event. We have to give more attention to Security Council referrals, and that's Sudan and Libya, and deliver on that, because if we can't succeed, when the Council refers, I think the whole body of law is weakened. But if we can show that the international justice is meaningful, and there is this utility between international peace and security requiring the anchor and foundation of justice, it may have very positive implications elsewhere. But the converse is also the case. Thank you.
السلام الأمير الزوال. تحدثت عن أنك التقيت البرهان قبل قليل. صراحة هل طلبت منه تسليم المطلوبين للمحكمة الجنائية الدولية؟ وإن كنت قد طلبت هذا الطلب فما كان رد البرهان بكل وضوح وبكل صراحة. تحدثت عن التعاون، عن ضرورة التعاون مع الحكومة السودانية. ما هي طبيعة الإجراءات المطلوبة من أجل تحقيق التعاون المطلوب؟
After this, one more question according to the time, and then we'll go. I think it's quite normal when one is dealing with somebody in the position of chair of the Sovereignty Council, that certain conversations should be dealt with discretion. One thing is clear, and the office has been clear about, that there are warrants. Sudan is aware of those warrants. When those warrants are applied for, they take on and and when they are issued by judges of the ICC, they take on the quality of a judicial order. They have their own life. They are a judicial order that require implementation. But, as I mentioned in the first or second question, the most important thing under the Rome Statute is accountability. It is the principle that people that are powerful cannot rape or kill or destroy or bully or trample upon people that are weak. That there is something called the law that is owned by humanity. It is found in Islamic law, it is found in Chinese law, it is found in the Rome Statute, and the Geneva Conventions, and the Rome, the Hague Conventions. So this is something that you own. This is not something I am selling. I'm not coming here as a traveling salesman to sell you a product. I said this at the opening of the judicial year, or maybe when I was sworn in. So, with my priority really is moving forward, whether that is the ICC sitting here, which is a possibility, or people going to The Hague being transferred, or whether it is some hybrid option. The point is we need to stop talking and seeing the results. And I have a clear responsibility, because it's in the Rome Statute, that I have to keep going in the way that we're trying to go. Unless a state is willing and able. And I don't see that at the moment, because there's no progress in terms of accountability for the issues in Darfur. But as I said, I think maybe more will become clear in my next report, because I've been given certain promises and now they have to be kept. I hope that is your answer, that you're pleased with. So I think the last question, the lady please.
سيدنا سعيد قناة الغد. أولا أريد أن أسأل المدعي العام عن سبب الزيارة لدارفور ومعسكرات دارفور والزيارة الإدارية للمعسكرات النزوح، هل بغرض المواساة أم الاطلاع على الوضع أم لتقديم تقرير على أرض الواقع لمجلس الأمن أم لتطمين الضحايا بأنه هنالك عدالة ستتحقق برغم طول هذه السنوات؟ السؤال الثاني يعني المحكمة المختلطة أو محاكمة المظلومين المحكمة الجنائية الدولية من قبل المحكمة بالتعاون مع القضاء السوداني، هل ترى أن هذه هي باتت الآن الأكثر حظا من تسليم المطلوبين حسب يعني متابعتك كمدعي عام ومن تعاونك الآن مع السلطات السودانية؟ شكرا.
It was critical for me to go to Darfur because I promised when I was here last I would go to Darfur. So I believe in trying to keep my promises. Now it was delayed a little bit. I wanted originally to come in April, but then the events in October, and then I wanted to come in July. And I postponed July because of the Eid. So I had to go and meet the victims. They have every right to see the prosecutor. It's important to listen. It is important that they can see and realize they're not forgotten, and that they are important enough, and their suffering is important enough that people will come and sit with them and hear what their views and concerns are. Because we are actually trying to make sure their voices are heard. How can they be heard? It can't only be heard by members of the trial team or by my investigators. As the head of the office, as the prosecutor in charge at the ICC, I have to also learn from them, listen to them, and understand what they're going through. And I found it a very valuable experience to actually see as opposed to read what their life is like, and also have the opportunity to hear from them. I think that's important. Also, in terms of my ability then to speak to the government here, because if I speak to buddies and security committees and I don't speak to the people, one may have a certain perspective, but it's always good to try to get a 360-degree perspective, and that must always entail the voice of victims and survivors and displaced communities being heard. In terms of the best option is cooperation, because that is a legal requirement. So this is why I keep saying, the first thing is cooperation, respond simple things like visas, or an office, or requests for assistance, giving the information that is being given. Or if you can't give it, respond and say why not, or give us something, and we can discuss how to get other types of evidence. This is clear. But in terms of different options, the law is wonderful. But also I want to be very clear, we can't keep discussing hypothetical scenarios. People want results, and we have a clear mandate. And we cannot tread water. We have to move forward with the Ali Kushaib case, which the team is doing very well. But at the same time, we have to make sure we are moving in relation to other cases. And I've tried to explain what my options are, what my preference is, and we will wait and see if we get the necessary cooperation. But of course, there's been talk of hybrid options, and I'm engaged with the African Union. We have an ICC, we know what it is. It can sit here, it can sit there. But what we need is not generalities, it's proper dialogue, proper discussions. Okay, what are your issues with this option or that option? And let's move beyond, the conceptual possibilities to some practical, granular detail that we can build something together that you all can see, that the victims can see. Because at the moment, what I can't hide is we've been talking a long time. And with the exception of the very important Ali Kushaib case, and that means a lot to the victims. That was also very moving for me, and it matters. The fact that I can read reports, but when I hear from victims and I can see it in their eyes with their tears, and I can hear it in their voices, that what that trial means, I think it should give us hope. Because those that also say international criminal law is weak and useless and it doesn't have an effect, my experience, whether it's in Cambodia or with victims in other parts of the world, or here in Darfur, I see what it means to them. And it doesn't just mean it to the actual witness in the court. As I said to the council yesterday, the type of evidence that is being heard by the judges of the ICC echoes that of many, many thousands of Darfuris. People have similar experience in fleeing in terror, or what they experienced. So when there is a trial and what happened to them is heard, even victims or witnesses who don't physically go to The Hague and speak, they feel that their lives matter because they do. So this is something that is actually very important to victim communities, but we need to make sure that we go wider than the Ali Kushaib case, the case against Mr. Abdul Rahman. And what I've said is that we need to really have concrete cooperation and assistance in a much more meaningful manner relating to the case against former President Omar al-Bashir, Mr. Hussein and Mr. Haroon. We need strong cases. I can't prosecute weak cases. It's not appropriate. For that, I need cooperation from Sudan. I need cooperation from the Security Council and from other member states of the United Nations, never mind state parties of the ICC. And I think if we feel this sense of responsibility, collectively, we can translate these words and these prayers into action. But that's why I will end as I started. Let's try to collectively share the burden. It's very easy to say this is failing, that is failing, from the comfort of our seats in different capitals of the world. But when we realize we have this joint obligation, we have this joint requirement, because of the law, because of religion, because of our beliefs, because of our humanity, then amazing things can happen. And I do say that Abdul Rahman case can be a catalyst, because people can say trials can start, but we need to move forward at this moment. Otherwise, there's an awful lot that could be jeopardized by continued talking and promises that are not kept. So thank you very much indeed for your time. And once again, I apologize for being a little bit late earlier. We couldn't give word. Thank you so much.